Drive Time with Tanvir on Radio Ikhlas.
In a world where confusion reigns supreme, there is one place. Drive Time. Drive Time. Drive Time. Drive Time.
Assalamualaikum, welcome back to Drive Time on Radio Ikhlas on 107.8 FM, the voice of sincerity. You're listening to Tanvir. It's now 5 o'clock on Monday the 14th of November. Very happy to announce my guest is now here from the spokesperson for MPACUK UK, Asghar Bukhari. Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Welcome back to Drive Time, my brother.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's been a very long time.
Sorry, you didn't catch that?
So it's been a very long time, Asghar, since the last time you were on.
I know. And you still look really young, Tanvir, by what I've seen of you.
Oh, Jazakallah, that's very kind words. You're the only person who said that. Okay, now, Asghar, your beliefs are that Muslims need to engage in the community and be politically active. Why do you feel so strongly about that?
I think it's just pure mathematics, logic. If a community is as demonized as the Muslim community, as under the spotlight, as oppressed, both, I'm not just talking worldwide, I'm talking right here in Europe and in the UK, then when a community is not politically mature, not politically conscious and active, then there's no force. They are unable to stand up to that demonization, to counter that demonization. And so they become totally at the mercy of those people who are demonizing them.
Right.
So it's pure any rational human being who understood that the threat that the Muslims were facing would think exactly the same way.
Okay. Now, many Muslims believe it's haram to vote in the United Kingdom for a non-Muslim government. You also did a documentary with Trey Azam about it. Can you tell us a little bit more about your feelings about this and about the documentary?
Yeah, I've done two documentaries. One with Trey Azam, who's a really great guy, and his producer was Abid Mar, who's a brilliant producer, and one for Channel 4 called Operation Muslim Vote. And both you can find on the internet. Type the into Google, and you should be able to pick them up. And all it was camera crews basically followed us and tried to kind of watch our attempt during election periods to get the Muslims out to vote, to vote tactically, vote strategically. The problem is that the older generation, I know my family is exactly the same way, almost voted like sheep. They basically vote along party lines, almost like in Pakistan, Bradri system, and everyone votes en bloc for the MP, no matter what that MP does. And the shocking thing was, when we started to do our research, is a lot of these MPs were either pretty anti-Muslim, some of the most anti-Muslim MPs were elected by Muslims, or they were apathetic. They didn't do anything for the Muslims. So, they put their topi on their head or a headscarf when they came into the mosque. Everyone thought, wow, how great these MPs are, and so happy to shake their hand. But if you looked at their track record, what they've actually done for the Muslim community, it was pretty much nothing, zero. And yet we continued to vote for them like sheep. And so what we did was we went out there and we said, well, hold on. We started to give leaflets outside the mosques and speak to Muslims and do talks. We started to say, what has your MP done for you? And, we highlighted if there was any anti-Muslim things that the MP had done. We were shocked to find that most Muslims didn't know about it. And even when a lot of these Muslims did know about it, they didn't care. They were so politically immature, so kind of pacified in a way that it didn't make any difference how they voted. They would continue to vote in this kind of slave-like way. So, that was what really the documentaries were about.
Right. Do you feel it's still the issue today that people are voting in regards to brotherism or who their friend is, not actually looking at the policies that this councillor is looking to implement?
Oh, nothing's changed, and it won't change. Why?
That's good. I think you keep breaking up.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah.
Nothing. If that continues, you could call a different number. But let's try on this phone for the moment.
Okay.
Nothing's changed really, and the reason is because who's teaching them to be politically mature? Remember, if a community, let's say a community can't speak English. I'm just giving an example here.
Yeah.
And you can't just assume that, in 10 years' time, they're all going to be able to speak English. Someone has got to educate them. There's got to be schools, there's got to be universities, there's got to be some program to change the state of a community from X to Y. Whereas if you look at the mosques and the ISOCs and the bookshops, they aren't teaching the Muslims how to become politically mature. They're doing the same old talks, the same old irrelevant subjects or minor issues. So, how can the Muslims ever become politically mature when there's no education program out there to teach them that? So nothing will change until the institutions of education for the Muslims, that is our mosques, that is our ISOCs, that is our bookshops, that is our scholars, that is our circles, start to understand that political education of our community is the highest priority, not the lowest priority. Right now, if you ask a Muslim about now, should women wear nail varnish, they'll know. Ask them what their MP has done, they haven't got a clue.
Right. But why do you feel it's so important that they need to know this? And why do you feel it's so important for them to vote? Some people might just say, they can't be bothered to vote. Why is it so important?
Every single thing that governs your life, everything, is down to people voting. Is down to the MPs that make laws about you. Look at Baba Ahmed. I don't know if people have been involved in this campaign. He weren't locked up just for fun. He was locked up on the basis of laws that were passed, right? Now, who passed those laws? Many of the MPs who we voted in were people who backed those laws, who pushed for those laws. So it's our fault. Over 100 MPs could have been swayed in England to ensure that those type of draconian laws were not passed. But we're more interested in talking about what item of clothing or what sect is wrong in Islam and why the mosque down the road is so bad, than we ever are about our very living conditions, our rights. Look at this group, Muslims Against Crusade, that got banned.
Yeah. The MAC. Yeah.
Weren't too upset about that. But look at the EDL. Are they banned?
No.
So, again, why? Because we've got no power. We've got no political power. And yet EDL, people who support the EDL are responsible for burning mosques down, for beating people up, destroying their lives. I know a particular person who had his face smashed in by people of the EDL. So much so they had to have metal plates put into his face. But we don't hear about this. Because who's going to tell us? If the news don't report it, the mosques aren't going to talk about it. The ISOCs aren't going to talk about it, because guess what? What's the big deal? Why do we have to know about politics? Our very lives are being demonized. Again, I ask you, do you remember when Shilpa Shetty was insulted on I think it was on Big Brother?
She was racially abused, yeah?
Yeah, now the Prime Minister came out, right? And he condemned what had happened to Shilpa Shetty, right?
Right, yeah.
But yeah, every single day the Muslims and people that we care about who are Muslims are demonized and attacked worse than Shilpa Shetty ever could. What has our Prime Minister ever done for us? So why do we say it's such a small thing that politics is so unimportant? And yet we talk about minor issues of Islam and make them major in the mosques. But the things that affect our life, our prophet being demonized, our God being demonized, our religion being demonized, people being attacked, beaten up in the street, nothing.
I mean,
because we don't understand how important politics is.
I think you talk about how important politics is and people should vote, but surely there's another issue in politics that you need the right representatives with the party, so people have somebody who they have confidence in voting for.
Look, okay, first we need to understand, right? There's two things here, right? One is politics just isn't about voting, right? Any political action is what we need. Any and all political action. For example, Malcolm X, just him talking about the racism that was within society and the government's hypocrisy, that was a political stand. You standing up and telling the truth to speaking up about issues like Palestine or Islamophobia, that's a political stand. Yeah, anything that talks about the issues of the Muslims and what they face today, right, and organising that community to stand up against those issues, that's political. Even if you were to post a comment on Facebook about what was going on about Palestine or the EDL, that's a political comment you're making. So I'm talking about political, that Muslims need to wake up their consciousness on all fronts, not just the voting. But on that voting issue about our representatives, I often hear Muslims, they always go, oh, well, what's the point of voting? It's always a negative. There's always a slave-like mentality of why they shouldn't do anything. What's the point of voting? You know, we voted for, I don't know, let's say any Muslim MP, and look what he did. He did, right? He didn't do anything for us. Well, what a silly point to make. The people who care for Islam, they're the people you should be electing. The people, just because their name is Muhammad and he happens to be in your Baradari, it does not mean he is going to stand up or she is going to stand up for Islam. And that's the problem. Again, it's this sheep-like mentality. We voted for a Muslim. He was a person who only cared for himself. So why did you vote for him? What, just because his name's Khalid? So just, you know, as a name I've just picked up out of thin air. Right. You know, you go for a MP that you know has some integrity. And if you are going to vote like sheep just because they've got a Muslim name, then don't complain afterwards if that person sold you out, because you didn't do your own homework.
But it's normally not the individual, it's normally the party that's voted for sometimes, you see. So
that's the problem, isn't it? Well done, Tanvir. That's the problem. Muslims, again, they vote on party like sheep. Why are you voting for a party? What party has ever done you any favours?
Yeah.
Stop voting for parties, start voting for people. If
No.
a person in that party is good, vote for him. And if he's not, then don't vote for him.
Yeah. Now, in your documentary, Trey, was it Barkham and Dagenham, was it, where the BNP had come into power because Muslims were not voting? Did that documentary actually make any change in the way those Muslims thought?
A lot. Well, remember, the documentary pretty much came up after. It wasn't allowed to be broadcast prior.
Yeah.
Right? So it wouldn't have made any change to the voting pattern then. In fact, that particular mosque you saw us campaigning outside actually told us to stop giving leaflets about Muslims, you know, to get them active and voting against the BNP. That's what we're fighting here, Tanvir. We're fighting mosques. Not only do they not do the work, we have to do the work. We have to pay. We have to stand out and take time off work to give those leaflets outside Friday, which none of the things that they do with their £1 million or whatever that they want to spend on a new shiny chandelier, but they don't even like it when you give leaflets outside.
Right.
The job they should be doing. So this having been attacked by the EDL, even then they didn't like the fact that we gave leaflets out, encouraged people not to take them.
Why do you feel masjids are not playing a bigger role in this matter?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Why do you feel the masjid is not playing a bigger role in this?
I think there's the main factor is that the people who run those mosques are, and I'm going to be polite as I possibly can, are uneducated.
You're breaking up now, Asghar. Asghar, you're breaking up again.
Sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me clearly now?
I can, yeah.
Yeah? So the people who run these mosques, they do not know the law. They're typically older generation, first generation men who have come over here and they don't know the law at all. And they typically came here for economic reasons, and they did a good deed and they built a mosque, And what they think is that if they speak about anything political, they're going to end up in prison.
Right.
and it's such a silly thing to think, because if you turn on the BBC, they're talking about political issues. If you open the Guardian newspaper, they're talking about political issues. Why is it that non-Muslims can talk about political, but a Muslim thinks that if he opens his mouth, he's going to end up in jail? I'm not asking them to say something stupid. I'm saying be politically educated about your rights and educate your community about their rights.
I think you're making a bit of a generalistic view, saying that there's a lot of older people running masjid committees. Actually, I think it's changing a lot now. I mean, our local masjid, the Jamia Masjid, has got a variety of people on board, from young to old, with very different educational backgrounds. And in fact, we have become the first city to get a state-funded Islamic school as well. So, you know, you can say there are some masjids who have got great examples of great committees on there, you see. I mean, you know, there may be some examples of, you know, some masjids who are still like that, but I've not actually ever come across any.
Tanvir, then you and me are going to have to disagree. I think the vast majority of the mosques in this country are apathetic, have got totally not in touch with what is going on in the world, and worse, they actively refuse to do anything to help the Muslim community stand up on their own 2 feet and become mature in any of the actions they need. All 99% of the mosques, all they ever do is teach the Muslims how to read the Quran and even then, normally the kids don't end up knowing exactly what the Quran means, because they're reading in Arabic. So I disagree with you. And if you're right, if I'm wrong and you are right, then let me ask you this. There's thousands, and we can take any issue, and I'm not just talking about, I'm just going to pick a issue up out of thin air, right? Yeah. Let's take the voting records of Muslims in any area, Muslim in this country, apart from maybe one area that you're going to pick in Birmingham with Salma Yakubian or something.
Yeah.
In the rest of England, how comes that Muslims voting along lines that against 4 MPs that are actually actively working against them? If I take another area, Baba Ahmed, around the country, why was it that the maximum mosques did was pretty much encourage people to sign a petition? He's been in prison for 7 years. Could you imagine any other community allowing people to be locked up for 7, 10, 14 years without trial, and they've never raised a massive nationwide campaign? What about his family? What about how many hundreds of Muslims are locked up without trial? Well, who's looking after their wives? Who's bringing up their children? Where are the mosques? There's so many prisoners in things. When are the mosques going to organise some sort of fund for their families? So you can't tell me that these mosques are doing something amazing. They're doing nothing. And if they're doing a little bit, that's what they should be doing. You know, I'm not. It always amazes me. It's like a sweet shop, and one day you go into a sweet shop and there's nothing in there for 10 years. And one day, the sweet shop owner, he's got a Mars bar. And then everyone's so happy. Oh, look, the sweet shop owner, he's got a Mars bar in the sweet shop. Well, that's what he's supposed to have. He's a sweet shop. So when the mosques do something, that's what they're supposed to do. What are they there for?
I think
they're not just open the gates on Friday prayer, collect some money, and then close it again.
I think that's the issue, Asghar. This is the issue. You mentioned Friday prayer Jummah, right? That is the only time when you have a large congregation in the masjid. Okay, so basically, as you know, there are a lot of masjids who are empty pretty much of the week, except for when they have children in the madrasas learning the Quran. Okay, so the only way you can get the message across to the public is on Jummah Khutbah, isn't it? Okay.
Let me take that up. Again, I've heard this defense of the mosque so many times. To be honest, there is no defense. Anything you want to put forward, I will counter with the logical explanation. Firstly, you talk about the Jummah Khutbah. 99% of those mosques out there don't even use the Jummah Khutbah for any benefit to the community, that actually social benefit. Let me give you an example. There was a Palestinian vote for United Nations that the whole country, the whole world was talking about. The massive mosque in Aldgate East, what was he talking about? Women should not come into the mosque wearing perfume. You see the disconnect between what is happening in the real world and what is happening in the minds of the people who are preaching. Let me just move on to why there was, you say there's no one in the mosques. Well, why should there be anyone in the mosque when there's nothing happening in the mosque?
I mean, they should be there to read namaz, shouldn't they, Asghar?
Sorry?
They should be there to read namaz 5 times a day.
Well, they should be there to protect their community, right?
Yeah, sure.
So there's no point talking about they should be there for they should be there for namaz. If the mosque is not there doing social things, right, then they're not doing anything. It's easy to say they should be just there for namaz. Islam isn't just namaz, right? Islam is there to help some woman who's had her window smashed because she's had a divorce and now the racists are beating her and her family up. But guess what? She goes to the mosque. It's not our problem. Islam is there for someone who's in prison without trial. Right? The Muslims are there for them. Islam talks about people who are homeless. What's happening with the mosque? They just open the mosque for salah and then complain when no one turns up. The mosque is there as a social center. That's what the Prophet, peace be upon him, had as the mosque. And yet, we complain that the Muslims don't turn up. I complain that the mosques aren't doing enough. That's why the Muslims are not there. The Muslims are in... Someone Yakuba did the talking. This is in your area, so you'll know about this more than myself. So I remember someone Yakuba once did a talk, yeah? And she wanted to talk about the Iraq War. She went to a mosque to do that talk, to say that we should stop the Iraq War. This is prior to the Iraq War. And they refused to let her talk. She ended up doing it in a church. Now, that's not uncommon. You think that's uncommon. That's not uncommon. That's common. So you can't defend these mosques. These mosques need to do more. You might think that it's harsher on the mosque, but I say, brother, it's harsher on the Muslims who have to suffer because they're not playing their part.
Yeah, I mean,
it's harsher on that Baba Ahmed. It's harsher on his family. It's harsher on the thousands of brothers and sisters who are suffering. Either they're homeless, they're in jail, they've got no jobs, they're suffering because all the mosques want to do, collect the money on Friday and open for salah. That is not what a mosque does.
Right.
The Prophet never had it as that, and he should have.
I think you find that there are a lot of mosques who are doing a lot more now, improving their education. Having libraries there. Having a lot more to do with the community. But how do you feel then, if you say that these mosques are not doing enough on a social level? How do you feel they can do more on a social level, and how are MPAC going to convince these mosques to do more on a social level?
The first thing that you do if you want any change in any institution is you need to highlight the need for change. As soon as I say that there needs to be change, believe me, and this is the course of this, it's the same anywhere, and any change, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, came about, and prophets before him, and Malcolm X, and you name any reformer of society, when they bring about a new idea and demand an improvement for society, what happens is that society is so used to being in their kind of backward state that they react, they respond, they go, no, it's not as bad as you're saying, everything's okay, stop causing trouble, stop. And so they want to remain in that state. So the first battle that the Muslim who wants to see an improvement within society has to do is he has to battle to get the idea for change on the agenda. And he has to win the argument against those people who want everything to stay the same, nothing to change, everything's okay, stop causing trouble, yeah? So that's the first idea, that we have to even get this on the agenda, on the table, that mosques need to change and they need to do more. Yeah, over and above the voices that want to tell you that it's not as bad as what you're saying and everything's fine. Yeah, because as soon as you get that voice, then everyone goes, well, what's the problem? Leave it. Let's discuss why women shouldn't wear perfume in the mosque rather than having some real social reform. Yeah, so that's the first battle. And then the second battle is young Muslims must be allowed to enter into the committees and the decision making within the mosque. I'm so glad that you said that one particular mosque has got more young people in, but that's rare. The first generation people did a good job, but the thing that they did really badly was that they held on to the almost as like a power trip, where they would not let young people enter those mosques and take positions within that mosque that could actually drive that mosque as a social hub for the community, just like the Prophet, peace be upon him, did. And until young minds, the best minds, the lawyers, the doctors, the activists, people actually really care about Islam. And I'm not really interested in how much money as a profession you earn, but the people actually are activists out there, the people actually really doing something for Islam, right? Defending Islam. They should be in those committees because they understand what the Muslims lead more than any, even more than any, solicitor or doctor or whatever. These activists know what the Muslims need because they're out there battling on their own from their bedrooms trying to help the Muslim community. So they should be allowed into that mosque to make that mosque a living hub and the center of our community. That's the second step. But the first step, before they're ever going to feel any pressure to allow these young activists in, they've got to feel that the community want it. And that means we have got to get the message out to and defeat those people who say there doesn't need to be a change, and we have to win that argument with the public, and the public, and then once they're educated and they go, yeah, we should have a mosque that does more than this, then the pressure is going to start building to allow these young activists in.
Right, okay. Let's slightly move on then. Let's talk about Sharia law. Tell me, do you think it should be adopted in the United Kingdom?
What a loaded question, eh? I mean, if they asked me that on Newsnight, what a conundrum that would be. Look, the thing is, right? Let me speak about this Sharia law business. I don't know why it keeps coming up. Yeah, look, Muslims are lucky. Yeah, I don't know if they're living in MPACUK land, right? But they are lucky that their mosques ain't being closed down, right? Their mosques in this country being burnt down. And these terms, Sharia law, just like the term jihad, has been so demonized by your enemies, right? While we've been sleeping, right? While we've been, smoking shisha and talking about, if women should be allowed to wear perfume or not, right? That the non-Muslim community, that is the people who run this country, right? And are the majority in this democracy, hate that word. They hate it because they don't understand it. Right?
Yeah.
In fact, they don't just hate it; they fear it. Right? It's become a word just like jihad that is a weapon against you. Yeah. People get scared as soon as you say it. Yeah. Now you can't blame a non-Muslim for hating and loathing the word jihad or the word Sharia, because guess what? Although God ordains it, although God might love those words, and He has put it in the Quran, yeah, we the Muslims have been so unpolitical, so pacified, so asleep, and this comes back to my, lack of slave-like mentality, unpolitical, unmature, that we have allowed God's own injunctions to be demonized and hated by the majority. So don't ask for something that you haven't even done the basics work for. I was on a radio, I think it was Radio 5 Live or something like that, a couple of years ago, and there was some prominent leader who quite a rational guy, and he asked for a Sharia law, and bang, straight away with headlines and demonizing. And I said, him and me on a debate in radio, and I said to him, we haven't done the basics. You haven't done the basics to convince people that this isn't a bad thing. So why are you coming out now, going to a television and scaring everyone with it, and making everyone as a stick to harm the Muslims?
But surely, the Muslims should have, a form of Sharia law for them to follow. I mean, the Jewish people have their own kind of laws. Maybe would they agree that
the Muslims should have mountains made of gold and lovely palaces, but do they have it? No, because they haven't done the work for it. So forget what the Muslims should have. Muslims should have a Mercedes outside every house and angels floating around their heads. They don't, do they? Because they haven't done even the basics to get anything. They shouldn't be killed in Palestine, but they are. They shouldn't be invaded in Iraq, but they are. We shouldn't be demonized in England. The papers shouldn't be attacking us in England, but they are. What are we Muslims doing about it is the question. Yeah, it's not about what we should have. We should have lots of things, but we don't have them. And I don't blame anyone for not having them. It's our own fault. This is a simple thing. Let me give you an example, right? And again, everything comes back to priority, comes back to a political, active Muslim that is not being created by these mosques and ISIS scholars that would just want to debate about minor things. I said to the local, one of these mosques that I visit around the country, and I said, look, why don't you have non-Muslims every month invited, thousands of them, not just a local priest, yeah, but give out invitations on cards and have a hotline, right? That it's just a 24-hour hotline. Anyone reads something in the paper that they hate about Islam and they're scared, they can call up. Let's say Sharia, yeah, or invite people in the local area to have a meal, non-Muslims, to talk about Sharia or talk about something that they're scared about, yeah, jihad or what are these words that they've heard in the paper but they don't really understand. And the mosque simply said, point blank, no kuffar in the mosque. And in this kind of crazy way, what I'm trying to say to you is that you cannot change society until you have the institutions that represent Islam backing you in the change of that society. Because what are you going to do then? How are you going to convince them? Do it from your bedroom? You might be doing a great job from your radio station, yeah? But your radio station is one radio station. And there's 60 million non-Muslims in this country. And how are they going to hear about it? So it has to be a real movement within Britain, a new change of a mindset that makes those Muslims realize that every single talk that we ever have about, one talk about jinn, another talk about is our trousers above our ankles, another talk about leather socks, these are all important, but they are not as important as your life and your liberty. And you cannot have anything, Sharia law or anything, until you wake up to that fact that that you need to be politically educated and fight for that and educate and mobilize and organize for you to achieve anything in this country. And right now we have none of that.
Right. I believe any talk about Islam is equally as important. If it is about how you do your wuzu and about leather socks, it's equally as important as
no, it's not
your
equally
social.
Important,
I mean, it's because you need to know the basics about Islam to be a Muslim as well, don't you?
Well, this is a classic fallacy and actually has no Islamic basis. Firstly, this is so many times I've heard this argument. Things are equally as important. Incorrect. Islam is a prioritized religion. Any simple analysis of that will show you that every single thing in Islam is based on a priority, right? For example, fasting. It's a priority, but in jihad, it's no longer a priority. If you are pig, you're not allowed to eat it. But if you're starving, you are allowed to eat it. Every single thing is based on priority, right? So how can it be that Muslims think that all the religious injunctions are the same? They're not the same. The defense of Islam and the Muslims is the highest priority. Everything else takes a lower ranking. So why do they think that everything's as important? It's not as important. As to the second part of your point where you say the basics, and this is again something that because the mosques have taught us to think in this poor, unanalytical way, it becomes almost un-Islamic. But what are the basics of Islam? The basics of Islam are not the 5 pillars as people think. The basics of Islam is the farad, right? The obligatory acts of Islam. Right? That's the basics. And if anyone says that you can do one but not the other, then could you say, well, I'll pray, but I can't be asked to fast in the month of Ramadan? Equally, a farad is a farad, obligatory act, right? So, defending of Islam, according to all scholars in the history of Islam, is a farad act. So how can someone think that the defending of the Muslim is not as important as fasting, for example, or Hajj? In fact, believe it or not, there is hadith to say it is more important than Hajj. It is more important than fasting. So no one can argue that that's not a basic. That is a basic. The defense of the life and liberty of the Muslim, of course it is a basic. So anyone who thinks that they've got to do things like talk about should women wear perfume and think that is a higher priority than the defense of their brothers who are suffering or their sisters who are suffering doesn't know that Islam is prioritized. And the reason why they don't know is because their scholars, their mosques, don't talk about it. And if anyone disagrees with me, bring your evidence. You're not going to win this debate because you're wrong.
Right. Let's move on a bit to global affairs now. What have you made about the Arab Springs and the falling of the dictatorship, sir?
Oh, what a amazing turn of events for the world, and something that I think deep in the heart of every Muslim, was, we've been waiting to have our own liberty, our own freedom, to see that crumbling of that system of dictators before our eyes. I never thought I would see it in my life. I never thought that. And to think that I lived through that time is probably, for me, it's probably the most historical period or the most significant period in the life that I've lived here. Yeah. So I couldn't be more happy. I remember when Egypt fell, everyone must have thought that I'd gone nuts because I was shouting down the street, Allahu Akbar. I was so happy. Yeah, I watched minute by minute. And when I went to Egypt for a holiday, the first thing I did is I went straight to Tahrir Square. And
did you see any difference? I don't know whether you've been before or not, but could you see the difference?
There was a massive difference. Yeah, the people were free in their hearts, their smiles, it was like the oppression, the secrecy, the secret police that was everywhere. They weren't afraid anymore. And that's something that I found. When I went there, I remember I broke down in tears because the people there when I entered Tahrir Square, I felt for the first time a a touch of how Medina must have been in the time of the Prophet. There were poor people. I'm talking, there weren't the rich people there. These were poor people, and they didn't have anything. They were just on the pavement, but they slept there, and they manned the gates to ensure that there was no secret police trying to enter, and they checked you, and they did it all for free. And when I tried to give them money, just say, look, take something, you could see from their clothes they were rags. They were too proud. They were saying, oh no, I can't take that. Because for them, they were doing this for God. They were doing this for Allah. They were doing this for their freedom. Yeah. They weren't taking it for money. They weren't. But I thought to myself, I never seen that amongst the Muslims in Britain. They're so wrapped up in money, so scared of everything, so ready to argue over stupid things. Would these people sacrifice their life, their time? They slept on the pavement in the cold and under threat of attack from secret police. But they were angels. They weren't afraid anymore. They were politically awake. They cared only for the triumph of the Muslims, and it was such a beautiful thing. And I'm so happy. My biggest fear is that the West, I don't know if you heard that, some of the presidential candidates, Newt Gingrich, actually said this is an Arab Spring. It's the anti-Christian spring. The forces out there in the world that see this as a threat, their hatred is so great that my fear is that they will use people and pay off people to destroy it, even embryo. The last thing they want to see is Muslims.
You're breaking up again, Asghar. Asghar, you're breaking up again?
Sorry, I was saying the last thing that these forces want to see, these anti-Muslim forces, Muslims to be free and to take up their own destiny and make their own decisions.
Okay. Which country do you think is going to fall next, Asghar?
Oh, God.
Seems to have gone completely blank now. Jazakallah to Asghar for joining us today. Let's go to a Naat which is requested by Aji Rizwan. If you do want to comment on anything Asghar said, he did have some very strong opinions there. Just to let you know, they are the opinions of Asghar Bukhari, who is a spokesperson for MPACUK UK, and they are not the opinions of Radio Ikhlas.
Drive Time with Tanvir on Radio Ikhlas.
In a world where confusion reigns supreme, there is one place. Drive Time. Drive Time.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Drive Time on Radio Ikhlas on 107.8 FM, the voice of sincerity. You're listening to Tanvir. It's now 5:46. We have a phone call. We're going to line one. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you, brother? You okay?
Alhamdulillah, good.
Okay, so brother, you want to comment on what Brother Saqib, Brother Asghar Bukhari said?
There's two points that he made which I thought were really nice. One was this issue about the basics in Islam and what that has to do with politics. And the second one was about priorities.
Yeah.
The issue of basics, I think, is really confused. For Muslims, we've never had an issue of separating religion and politics in our history.
Right.
The Prophet himself was a ruler of Medina, wasn't it? And his companions were rulers of large empires, large states that spanned from Morocco all the way towards India. So Islam and our personal lives, social lives, politics is always mixed. That's never been an issue. The issue started, I think, and this whole debate about what are the basics of Islam was when the secular nationalists carved up the Ottoman Empire in 1924 and they took over.
Yeah.
I remember, for example, the Sufi group Naqshbandis. They fought against many of these people. They were finally defeated and crushed. They were part of jihad against the British in the First World War, and they supported the Ottoman rulers. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk and his secular nationalists crushed them, threatened to slaughter the lot of them unless they went back to the mosques and stuck with what he believed were the basics, which were just the rituals of Islam and the creed.
Right.
And ever since that day, across the Muslim world, all the rulers who are secular nationalists, which the Muslims are rebelling against and want them all out, most appointed by the West, did a similar policy.
Yeah.
The Muslims then have started to believe, because it's now been a policy and through our education systems, universities, TV, media, how the mosques are funded, they've re-emphasized religion is a personal matter, learn the basics such as wudu and salah and your rituals and your creed, And when it comes to politics, until your basics are perfect already, you'll never really be able to address it, which is absolutely
So can I just
nonsense.
stop you, please? I know that was one of the points mentioned. I just want to talk to you about something else, and then appreciate you giving me your opinion. I want to talk about his point about him saying, I may have missed it because I know you didn't listen to all the show. I want to, sorry for butting in as well. I want to ask you about his question, saying he said that mosques need to play a bigger role in the social aspects of being a Muslim. I just want to ask you what your feelings are about that.
I disagree. The mosques should play a role in the social aspects, and they do.
Yeah.
The community need to ensure all our institutions play a big role in our social affairs, and it shouldn't be just all plugged or put at the door of the mosque.
Right.
So, for example, your show, Radio Ikhlas, is an institution in the community, and it can educate, it can contribute towards our collective debates and discussions going on.
Yeah.
The mosque can do things like our collective affairs, such as Jummahs, it can do janazas, it can organize education after school, and so on. But, for example, the majority of our community has a mortgage. Now, for a Muslim community, that's really unusual for it to be done en masse. It's a clearly known haram. So doesn't it make sense? Just like how some individual families do committees, why not set up a trust fund or a collective community committee, separate organization, separate institution? We all put money in, it buys properties and sells them to people who need properties in the community without mortgages. It sells it to them at cost. They pay it, and maybe they contribute also towards some rent. And when they pay half the property funds back, they pay half the rent. And when they pay all of the money back, they own it all, they pay no more rent. That as an institution is needed in our community. It's a political matter. Yeah. We also need, for example, people who are elected by ourselves who deal with our collective community political issues. For example, in our communities and up and down the country for some reason, we have red light districts. You walk up and down Normanton Road and you'll see billboards with hello boys and women in bikinis. I don't know if you remember the bus stop a few weeks ago.
Normanton Road
had a woman in bikini selling M&S bras and such like.
Yeah.
Some guys, I think, sprayed over it with a hijab. Next day, the council was down and they cleared up the hijab and the jilbab they'd sprayed over her to reveal a semi-naked woman again, which 80% of the people who go up and down Normanton Road will see.
Yeah.
Surely we need people in the community who stand up, which we elect, and don't chase after parties like Tories and Labour and Lib Dems and fulfill their political agendas. They fulfill our political needs, our Islamic political needs, and they lobby the council or the government and say, we don't want this rubbish in our communities. Could you pass laws that make it porn-free? I don't know if you know, Normanton Road is alcohol-free. There's a stretch which the council has passed bylaws to make it alcohol-free. Why not make it, our communities, porn-free? So we don't have this kind of billboards and this kind of rubbish. Why not make it prostitution-free? So we don't have on that at the moment up and down Normanton Road.
Now you said that there should be a political party which represents the Muslims. Are you trying to say there should be a separate Islamic party that...
No.
No?
No, that's not needed at all. All that's required is the guys who, for example, yourself, your committee guys on Radio Ikhlas, sit with all the mosques, arrange a meeting, monthly meetings with all the mosque committees. Get the guys at the Pakistani Community Centre, invite the public, and say that we need to choose somebody who can stand up and represent our collective community matters in the next elections. He's not with any party, he's not with any group. We can elect him between ourselves, and if we're not happy that he's Sufi or Brelvi or from one denomination or another, rotate it. Every year or 2 years, he's from one side of the community and then from another side, but we collectively set the agenda. These are the points we need you to lobby on. These are the points that the community need to be able to live according to an Islamic way of life.
So basically you're trying to like a lobbying group, so go lobby parliament and things like that.
It's not I wouldn't say it's a lobbying group. It's our political representative who goes and says this is the last list of demands or the needs this community has to be able to live according to their way of life. They want to deal with crime. They want to deal with filth. They want to deal with drugs. They want to deal with these sexual grooming scandals that are going on. The BBC are now digging up. There's beatings going on in the mosques and such like. So we have collective issues which are separate from these theological disputes and these basics which we keep being reminded of having long beards and telling of trousers and getting the finer theological points of our creeds, nitty-gritties accurate. They're not dependent on those. Those are separate, and those can be taught and discussed separately. All the communities, and I was talking to some guys from the Tablighi side and the Deobandi side a few weeks ago, and they were saying we need to collectively pull our socks together because even we feel them in our section of the community. The wider community feels similar stuff. So why don't we collectively sit together and get people who will actually stand up and represent what our needs are, rather than these self-fulfilling politicians who want to be MPs and they want titles and pats on the backs, and when they go to Pakistan, this is a minister and this is a councillor and now he's going to be mayor, and their interests are just for themselves, for their political parties who set their agendas, and whips who whip them into line if they start to move away from it, and they don't represent us at all.
Yep. I mean, it'd be good to have a group like that who could actually represent our views as a community and, you know, get more views out for the Muslim community on that point. But unfortunately, Zafar, we have come to the end of my show. So Jazakallah khair for your views and opinions today. Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so Brother Zafar there saying that, you know, we need like a group to be, you know, a little bit more powerful in our